I don't know exactly how to begin, because how do you explain something that has no name? Doctors have tried, therapists have speculated, but no one can give me an answer. You see, I have what some might call a disability, but that word doesn't even scratch the surface of what I go through. Most people think of disabilities as something physical, something that affects your body or mind in ways that are easy to understand. But mine is different. It's far worse than anything I ever imagined. At first, it started subtly. I thought it was just fatigue or maybe the side effects of stress. My body felt heavy, sluggish, like I was being weighed down by something I couldn't see. And then came the episodes, moments where my body wouldn't respond to my commands. I would try to move, but my limbs felt distant, disconnected, like they belonged to someone else. It wasn't paralysis. I could feel everything, but it was as if my body was no longer mine to control. I thought it was just my nerves, some strange disorder. But then the voices started. Faint whispers at first, barely audible, like someone standing just outside the room, murmuring too low for me to make out the words. I chalked it up to stress, or maybe even auditory hallucinations. But as time went on, the voices became clearer, louder, and more persistent. I tried to explain it to the doctors, but they just looked at me like I was crazy. They ran their tests, hooked me up to machines, scanned my brain, but every result came back normal. There's nothing wrong with you, they'd say. It's all in your head. But I knew that something was terribly, horribly wrong. And the worst part? It wasn't just affecting my mind. It was starting to change me, inside and out. Something was happening to me, something no one could understand or explain. And I was beginning to fear that this disability wasn't something medical at all. It didn't take long for the strange sensations to intensify. What started as occasional whispers soon turned into a constant, unnerving presence in my life. I would hear them everywhere, in my house, at work, even in the dead silence of night. They weren't just random voices anymore. They were calling my name, taunting me, like they knew something I didn't. But that was just the beginning. My vision, it started to warp. At first, it was small things. A flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow passing too quickly to register. I would turn, expecting to see someone, but there was no one. Then the shadows became shapes, figures standing just out of reach, staring at me. I'd blink, and they'd be gone. But the feeling, the overwhelming sense that I was being watched, never left. It followed me everywhere, pressing in closer, tighter, like I couldn't breathe without feeling eyes on me. And then my body began betraying me. It's hard to explain what it feels like to lose control of yourself. There were moments when I would look at my own hands and they wouldn't seem like mine. They'd move, twitch without me commanding them. Sometimes they'd freeze entirely, as if locked in place by some invisible force. I would try to scream, to move, but my body felt distant, foreign, as though it had been borrowed by someone or something else. The worst part was the feeling. Not pain exactly, but something deeper, a gnawing sensation from the inside. It felt like I was being hollowed out, piece by piece, like my body was just a shell, and whatever was inside me was slipping away. When I told the doctors, they were quick to dismiss it. Psychosomatic, they said. Stress-induced hallucinations. But I knew better. This wasn't stress. This wasn't some hallucination. There was something darker, something wrong happening to me. I could feel it in my bones, crawling beneath my skin. Every time I closed my eyes, I could sense it creeping closer, waiting for the moment when it would take full control. And I was helpless to stop it. I stopped trying to explain what was happening to me. No one believed me anyway. The more I talked about it, the more they looked at me with pity, with doubt, like I was losing my mind. I could see it in their eyes, the way my friends would glance at each other, my family would fidget, as if they were all waiting for me to snap. I guess in a way they thought I already had. The doctors couldn't help. Their tests came back clean, their scans normal. So, they labeled me as mentally unwell and handed me prescriptions I never bothered to fill. What good would medication do for something like this? This wasn't some chemical imbalance or neurological disorder. I wasn't sick, I was being consumed. I began to withdraw from everyone. I stopped answering calls, ignored texts, and avoided visits. I couldn't stand the looks anymore. The concern on their faces mixed with disbelief. They thought I was making it all up, that I was imagining the whispers, the shadows, the strange sensations. But I wasn't. Every day it got worse. Every day, I felt something deeper inside me change. Something dark and twisted that I couldn't explain. It felt like there was a presence in me, watching from behind my own eyes, waiting for its moment to emerge. I moved through life like a ghost, trapped between this world and whatever was clawing at the edges of my reality. My home became my prison. I locked the doors, shut the blinds, and tried to shut out everything and everyone. But it didn't help. Nothing helped. The whispers followed me into every room. No matter how quiet or still I tried to keep things. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, even when I was sure I was alone. I remember staring at myself in the bathroom mirror one night, studying my reflection, looking for something, anything, that would tell me I was still me. But I didn't recognize the person staring back. My face looked the same, but my eyes. There was something wrong with my eyes. They felt hollow, lifeless, as though whatever made me human had already started to slip away. My family stopped visiting. My friends drifted off too, one by one. They couldn't handle it. I guess I can't blame them. I was unraveling in front of them, and they couldn't understand why. Maybe they didn't want to. But as they left, I started to believe that maybe this wasn't something from this world at all. This wasn't a disease or a disorder. It was something far worse. I started to feel like whatever this disability was, it had a purpose. It wasn't just breaking my body and mind. It was preparing me for something. Something from beyond. Something I couldn't escape. And the more I pulled away from the people who loved me, the more I realized I wasn't just losing myself. I was being replaced. It was only after I cut myself off from everyone that the real terror began. As if my isolation fed whatever was stalking me. The activity in my house grew worse, more intense, more deliberate. I could feel it, that I was no longer just a victim of my own mind or body. Something was in my home with me. Something that had been waiting for this very moment. It started with small things at first. Objects wouldn't be where I left them. A book I'd placed on the table would end up on the floor. Doors I knew I'd shut would be open just a crack, as if someone had gently nudged them. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was just being forgetful, that the stress was playing tricks on me. But the more I ignored it, the more aggressive it became. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a soft scraping sound coming from the hallway. It was subtle, barely noticeable at first, but it grew louder, closer. I held my breath, hoping it would stop, that it was just the house settling or maybe the wind. But then I heard it, the unmistakable creak of the floorboards right outside my door. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the gap beneath the door, waiting for a shadow to pass, for some sign of what was out there. But nothing came, only silence. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it. But the next morning, I found long, deep scratches on the hallway wall, as if something had been dragging its claws along the surface. My blood ran cold. I hadn't imagined anything. It was real. Then came the figures. It was always in the mirrors. At first, it was just a fleeting glimpse, something standing behind me in my reflection. But when I'd turn, there'd be nothing there. I'd dismiss it as paranoia, a trick of the light. But soon they became more distinct. Human-like shapes, standing perfectly still, watching me. They never moved, never spoke, but I could feel their presence. Each time I saw them, they were closer. I started to avoid mirrors entirely, covering them up or keeping the lights off, hoping that if I didn't see them, they wouldn't see me. But they did. The whispers grew louder, more persistent, filling every corner of my home. I couldn't make out the words, but they were there, taunting me, feeding on my fear. The air in the house grew thick, oppressive, like the walls were closing in on me. I could feel something following me from room to room, always just out of sight, always just beyond reach. One night, as I sat in the living room, trying to calm my racing mind, something happened that I'll never forget. The TV flickered on by itself, static hissing across the screen. I stared at it, frozen, as the static began to clear, revealing a shadowy figure standing in the center of the screen. It wasn't a person, it was something darker, something wrong. Its form was distorted, like it didn't belong in this world. And then it moved, not on the screen but in the reflection of the TV behind me. I turned, but nothing was there. When I looked back at the screen, the figure was gone. But I knew it was still with me. Whatever this was, whatever had latched onto me, was growing stronger, feeding off my fear, my isolation, my despair. I realized then that this condition, this disability, it wasn't just a physical or mental affliction. It was a beacon, drawing these things to me, inviting them into my life. The more vulnerable I became, the more they fed, and I had no way of stopping it. I was never truly alone. I don't know what made me think I could escape. Maybe it was a final shred of hope, or maybe just pure desperation. But I couldn't take it anymore. The shadows, the whispers, the feeling of being watched, hunted, in my own home. I packed a bag, barely thinking, and ran. I drove for hours, trying to put as much distance between me and whatever had taken hold of my life. I thought if I could just get away, if I could leave it all behind, maybe I'd be free. But it followed me. I should have known. No matter how far I drove, the air felt the same, thick, suffocating, filled with that familiar dread. The whispers didn't stop, and the shadows didn't fade. Even in broad daylight, I felt it lurking just behind me. It was as if I had brought it with me. No, not with me. It was already inside me. I ended up in a small motel, too tired to keep driving, too exhausted to keep running. I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and tried to calm my mind. I told myself I just needed rest. Maybe if I slept, everything would reset, and I'd wake up free from this nightmare. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I was never going to escape. I don't know how long I lay there, staring at the ceiling, but eventually, I drifted off. That's when the dreams came, or at least I think they were dreams. They felt too real. I was standing in a vast, empty space, surrounded by darkness. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it watching me, moving closer. My body was frozen, as if it wasn't mine to control anymore. And then, out of the darkness, I saw it. A figure not quite human, not quite anything. It was me, but it wasn't. It looked like me. My face, my body. But there was something wrong. Something off. Its eyes were empty, void of life, like black pits staring into my soul. It smiled, a twisted, mocking grin, as it reached out to me. And in that moment, I understood. This thing, this entity, it was me. Or rather, it had become me. When I woke, drenched in sweat, heart pounding in my chest, I ran to the bathroom. I needed to see myself to confirm I was still me. But when I looked into the mirror, the person staring back wasn't me anymore. The eyes were wrong, hollow, just like in my dream. The reflection smiled at me, that same cruel, knowing grin. I stumbled back, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. But the truth was undeniable now. This disability, this curse, wasn't something that had happened to me. It was something that had become me. Whatever it was, it had been inside me from the start, slowly taking control, feeding off my fear, my isolation, until there was nothing left of the person I used to be. I wasn't being haunted by something external. I was being consumed from within. I was no longer human, not fully. Something darker, something ancient, had taken root inside me, using my body, my mind as a host. And now I was just an empty vessel. I don't know how much time I have left before it takes over completely, but I can feel it growing stronger, more in control. I'm losing myself piece by piece. Soon there will be nothing left of me, only it, and when that happens, I'll be gone.